You know how sometimes you can instantly dislike someone just as quickly as you can develop feelings for them. Maybe it's the same reaction, just in reverse. I work for a large retail chain as a middle manager. I don't have any direct supervision over employees because my role mostly involves handling external partnerships. So, what happens inside the store doesn't usually affect me. That's why, when I started dating Ava, one of the sales associates, I didn't think much of keeping it private. I wasn't her boss, so there was no real issue. We weren't making a spectacle of our relationship, but we weren't hiding it either. And in a place where gossip spreads faster than wildfire, especially among the female staff, it didn't take long for everyone to find out. We'd been together for a year and had even started making wedding plans. Honestly, if Ava hadn't shared our relationship with her colleagues in confidence, it might have stayed under the radar for much longer. But you know how it goes. What's said in confidence to one person often gets passed on. Soon, the entire team knew. Our relationship was amazing. We hardly ever fought, and we were intimate nearly every night. Ava was stunning, beautiful face, incredible figure. She would come to work an hour before me and leave an hour earlier too. Everything was perfect until Mark joined the team. He was hired for warehouse duties, unloading trucks, moving pallets, stocking shelves. At first, Mark seemed ordinary, average looks, athletic build, taller and more muscular than me. But he was also a shameless flirt. Word spread quickly that he'd hit on nearly every woman in the store. He'd choose one, charm her for a while, maybe take her out after work, and then at some point, it would crash and burn. The woman would cut him off, and he'd move on to the next. Normally, I wouldn't have cared, but there was one issue. Mark instantly disliked me. He'd throw little sarcastic jabs whenever he could, often for no reason at all. They weren't insults that would make me want to fight him, but more like sharp little comments in front of others, making me feel stupid and unable to come up with a good comeback. You know how it is. Later, you replay the moment in your head and think, why didn't I say that? But by then, it's too late. If he noticed I'd polish my shoes, he'd sneer. Guess the only workout Alex can handle is bending over to polish those shoes. Or if I was fidgeting, he'd joke, dude, if you're that worried about making it to the bathroom, we've got adult diapers on aisle 6. The others would laugh, and even Ava sometimes. I would freeze. Arguing with him in front of everyone would have made me look foolish. Eventually, I started avoiding him. If I saw him around, I'd find a way to take a different route, but it was as if he took pleasure in cornering me. He would pop up out of nowhere, mocking me under the guise of jokes. Then, he found out about Ava and me. More than once, I'd catch him chatting with her when no customers were around, probably after he'd finished unloading some stock. He'd be flirting, and I'd see Ava laughing, twisting a strand of her hair, the same way she used to when we first started dating. That night, I sat down with Ava and told her everything. I explained how it felt like Mark was bullying me with his sly comments, and I needed her to know how much it bothered me. I knew Mark had a reputation as a player, and I was pretty damn sure he'd set his sights on Ava. Ava, I said, my voice firm, I need you to cut him off. No chatting, no hanging out. Call me paranoid if you want, but he's already messed with half the women here, at least tried to. It's like a game to him. She looked at me softly. I love you, she said. I'm not letting him get anywhere with me. Don't worry. I should have felt better. But part of me secretly wished she had promised to avoid him completely, and maybe even tell him to back off, making it clear she wasn't interested. The next day, I saw them again, far from her department, chatting on the main aisle. Mark was talking, and Ava was laughing. I could tell by her body language. Her feet were facing him, her shoulders rolled back, and her chest was out. She held her wrist loosely, her posture wide open, signaling clear interest. They weren't touching, but it made me sick. That was when I realized, right there, that she wasn't mine anymore. Later that day, I saw them chatting in 3 different spots, always away from her area. They had that same flirty vibe. They weren't kissing or anything obvious, but it was the way she spoke to him, the way she looked at him. It all felt like a green light. I tried talking to her that night, but she lied, saying she hadn't spoken to him. I could have called her out, told her I'd seen her or watched the security footage, but what good would it do? They hadn't slept together yet. If I exploded over it, she'd just be more careful. A part of me hoped she would snap out of it. So, yeah, I started spying a little. Sometimes, I'd show up at the store an hour early, tell the security team I was monitoring early morning shoppers for a marketing project, and then I'd watch the footage to see if Ava was with Mark. Meanwhile, I kept trying to shower her with affection and talk about our future together, hoping she would resist the temptation. Then on Saturday, she didn't come home. I arrived an hour after her shift ended, and she was nowhere to be found. All I got was a text saying she was meeting her girlfriends and would be home late. I knew right then where she was, even without proof. The proof arrived shortly after, directly from Mark. He sent me a link to a video saved in his cloud. I watched as Ava was completely absorbed in what she was doing with him. Then Mark turned the camera toward himself, smirking at the lens and flipping me off, making it pretty clear he was filming this with me in mind. The camera panned back to Ava. I saw Mark flick her nose gently to get her attention. She looked up, pretending to be annoyed, but only in that teasing way some women do when they secretly enjoy being playfully teased. "Hey," I heard him say, "we'll watch this video later and remember the good times. Come on, blow a kiss." She smiled, raised 2 fingers in a peace sign, then puckered her lips as if sending a kiss. She probably had no idea Mark was planning to share this video, but it felt like she was putting on a show for me. At that moment, I realized everything between us was over. As for them, they kept going. And as humiliating as it is to admit, I couldn't tear my eyes away. I ended up watching the entire video to the end. Mark panted, "So how was that? Am I better than Alex?" "Better," Ava laughed, without hesitation. "I'm going to you at work tomorrow, before he even shows up." Mark smirked. That's kind of risky," she half protested. But he tapped her cheek and said, "I'll decide when and where. You're mine now." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, but strangely, there was also a sense of relief. There was no doubt anymore. I started packing her things into boxes. After about an hour, I drove to her parents' house and dropped off 3 boxes and a duffel bag full of her belongings. I rang the doorbell and ran before they could see me. Her dad opened the door, stared at the pile, and I quickly left. Back home, I grabbed a bottle of gin, one that Ava had given me a while ago. I was about to open it, but then a crazy idea started to form in my mind. I knew that the next day at work, Mark would be waiting to rub it in. He'd probably have an audience of store workers and expect me to be too humiliated to fight back. Maybe he'd even show the video around. I'd be the miserable fool everyone whispered about. Maybe I'd quit in shame, but my plan wasn't done yet. I turned off my phone, disconnected the doorbell, locked up tight, and shoved some makeshift earplugs in. I didn't want to hear a thing. Apparently, Ava came around, banging on my door and screaming for over an hour, but I slept like a rock. Later, my neighbors told me she had a complete meltdown. Honestly, I couldn't care less where she spent the night. Morning came, and I parked a block away from work. I walked in with a paper bag under my arm, and sure enough, there was Mark by the entrance, surrounded by a few warehouse workers and some of the female staff, all curious to see how I'd react. I gave them a show. "Hey, Mark," I called out, forcing a big smile. "Thanks, man. You really saved me a ton of hassle." I pulled the gin bottle from the bag. "Here, take this. You can even share it with Ava if you want. This is from home, so no one can accuse me of stealing store merchandise." Mark blinked, clearly confused. What?" I grinned. "Yeah, dude, I've been wanting to ditch Ava for ages. I was feeling guilty because she hadn't really given me a reason to, but once I realized you were hitting on her, I figured I'd lay low. I didn't want to confront you, because if I did, you'd back off, and I'd never get rid of her. Thanks to you, I now have the perfect excuse to break it off. So I'm free. I smiled wide. It's awesome, man. Thanks for doing all the dirty work. I appreciate it. Mark squinted at me, confused. What the hell are you talking about? What plan? I acted surprised. You didn't guess? I thought you were at least smart enough to see that I basically turned a blind eye so you could give me a legit reason to dump her. Everybody wins. Except her, I guess. But hey, no one can call me a jerk now, right? She cheated. I'm done. End of story. I glanced around at the onlookers. Warehouse guys, sales associates, some of them snickering, others wide-eyed. Then I spotted one of Mark's co-workers, holding a phone with a distinctive case, paused right on the explicit video. Oh, hey, I said, suddenly noticing. Did everyone see that famous little clip? Mind if I take a look? The co-worker froze. I grabbed the phone from his hand. My fingers were trembling with adrenaline, but I kept a calm face. I selected a bunch of files from the video folder on the phone. Without hesitation, I hit Send to All Contacts, then tapped OK and hit play. Poor Mark. His triumphant moment turned into an absolute disaster within a minute. Then it dawned on me. I had just sent every single file from his private folder to all of his contacts. Who knew what other videos were in there, but there was no going back now. As the explicit video started playing on everyone's phones, people crowded around. Half a dozen female employees let out horrified gasps. You sent that to all his contacts? One of them cried, clutching her phone. That means my husband too. Oh, God! Another one groaned. My husband's in his contacts as well. Within minutes, 5 women were screeching and cussing out both me and Mark. It turned out that in addition to Ava's video, the folder included footage of him hooking up with a bunch of other women, married women. Because of his job, Mark had nearly everyone's phone numbers, plus some of their spouses. So now, loads of husbands and parents were getting a nasty surprise. Even if they didn't personally see it, the rumor mill would handle the rest. I didn't see Ava until lunchtime. She looked pale, her eyes red from crying. The moment we locked eyes, I could see the raw terror in her face, but it wasn't fear of me. More like, what the hell is happening to my life? People gave her a wide berth, except for a couple of other women who were also in meltdown mode, because their husbands had received the videos too. The next day, Mark didn't show up for work. By lunchtime, word had spread that he'd been jumped by some thugs and was seriously hurt. Odds were, once he got out of the hospital, he wouldn't be coming back. Broken bones take a long time to heal. Meanwhile, a few of the sales associates clocked in wearing heavy makeup, but even that couldn't hide the deep sadness on their faces. The dark circles under their eyes made their grief even more obvious. Thanks for listening to my story. Feel free to share your thoughts or tell me how you'd have handled it differently. If you enjoyed listening, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this. Until next time, take care.